When you came in and sat down, there was a piece of paper on your seat. I'm suspecting many of you actually sat on it. If you want to go ahead and grab that. If you'd hold it up just so I can see that everybody has it. We're ready. Nearly. Okay, now let's tear it up. Tear it up. Just completely shred it. Let's see if I can even do it. And while you're finishing that up, I'll show you my latest work. So I finished this piece just a couple days ago. And what I want to talk about, actually, I should probably let you know first that the pieces of paper you just tore up were actually this picture. You just completely destroyed this project. So how does that feel? I saw a slight gasp, a gulp. Maybe some of you are contemplating how to tape it back together. We all have memories of destroying things. I remember when I was a kid, I would blow up pumpkins with fireworks, and I'd shoot holes in lawn chairs with my BB gun and take apart radios and VCRs just because I was curious to see what was inside. Destroying things comes natural to us. But over time, we learned that destroying things gets us into trouble. So we learn that we need to hold on to everything. That once something's created, it needs to stay that way. And this leads to us holding on to nearly everything and avoiding destruction almost altogether. I carried this approach with me for many years. Then a couple of years ago, I was doing all this really large-scale work, and I was just simply running out of space. If you've ever seen the TV show Hoarders, this was like the artist edition. But I just felt my space was getting narrower and narrower, and eventually the physical clutter soon became mental clutter. I felt that I needed to make a change, so I decided to do some experimenting. This turned into a year-long project that completely changed my idea of destruction, and with it, my approach to not only my work, but my life. I called this series of work Goodbye Art. The idea was that each and every piece of art had to be destroyed after its creation. At the time, I was working as an X-ray tech, and one day at work, I was shooting the films on a car accident victim, and I saw in one of the images that the patient had dirt jammed in their pocket. I was like, well, if dirt can show up in an X-ray, then I can make an image with sand. So I bought supplies, I made a mold, and by varying the thickness in the sand, it creates different shades in the image. So I filled the mold full of sand, I took it to work in the middle of the night so no one would see what I was doing, and I X-rayed it. And when the image came out of the processor, I was just thrilled to see that this concept had actually worked. It was only on the ride home I realized I wasn't done yet. I had to destroy it because it was part of this Goodbye Art series. I felt myself getting all nervous and anxious because I just spent all this time working on it, and the idea of destroying it just seemed pointless. I thought maybe if I make a copy and I don't tell anyone. But I knew if I did that I wouldn't be able to destroy any of the other projects. So I put it in the shredder, I dumped it in the trash, and it felt horrible. I knew if I was ever going to get into the swing of destruction, I was going to have to make the destruction process more interesting, so I'd have something to look forward to. One idea I had was to make an image with the tips of matches, but the problem was that the matches only came with a red tip. So I spent the better part of 2 weeks coloring thousands of matches one at a time. Then when it was all done on a fun-packed Friday night, I started stacking and hot gluing all of the matches. I worked through the night, and at 10 a.m. it was done. I promptly took it outside. I set up my camera, and it was at this moment that I began to embrace destruction. The excitement of destroying the piece overpowered the sadness of letting it go. I was starting to see the value of destruction. As each time I created, destruction brought me back to a neutral place where I felt refreshed and ready to start the next project. I also noticed something else. As I was gradually letting go of the outcome, I found that making mistakes in the work didn't matter either, which is odd for me because my early obsession with pointillism had dot by dot turned me into a perfectionist. But without an end product to dwell on, I dug further into the process and I saw mistakes as its own process that took me down a different path than normal. I found myself starting to embrace imperfections when I worked with temporary materials, like Oreo filling, spitting out food, and frozen wine. Temporary materials can be difficult to work with because their application can be unpredictable. One project I really struggled with, it was rubbing French fries on a sheet of paper. It sounds so simple, but the oil in the fries makes the paper transparent, which makes it impossible to retract mistakes. But instead of dwelling on the mistakes, I dug further into the process and wondered if there was other ways of applying the oil. Then I took what I learned and was able to apply it later on for a commercial project. In the course of the Goodbye Art series, I created 23 different pieces, none that I can hang on a wall. Along the way, I stabbed myself with needles, I was kicked out of public parks, I felt nauseous on numerous occasions, and I nearly set the deck on fire. But in return, I found a process of creating art that's perpetual, and it's unencumbered by result. By destroying all of the work, I was learning to let go. I let go of outcomes, I let go of failures, and I let go of imperfections. And instead of having finished pieces, I let myself go further into the unknown with trust. Trust that something else will always come along, and trust that I have the ability to create no matter what is lost. Goodbye Art opened up a whole new phase of creativity for me. One thing I've always tried to incorporate into the design of my work is accessibility, finding different ways for people to connect with art. One of my most recent endeavors is to translate the habits of creativity that I learned from the destruction phase into something others could replicate. As I put my work out there to create a public dialogue, I received a lot of emails from people who were curious about how they can generate more ideas and how to be more creative. I saw that creativity was simply connecting experiences, combining and recombining ideas that had previously seemed unrelated. In order to be more creative, we need to both practice making connections with our experiences and gain new experiences to make more connections possible. That was basically the idea behind my book, Tattoo a Banana. At first glance, it's a book about exploring objects at home and turning them into art. But the heart of this book is about forming the building blocks that make us more creative. For example, let's look at a banana. We're all familiar with bananas. We usually eat them. We can imagine slipping on them. But one day, I was sitting around home doing some experimenting. Next slide, please. Next one. I was doing some experimenting, and I realized I could put an image on a banana by poking it with a pushpin and letting it oxidize. This is how the book came together, finding different materials that we're all familiar with and presenting them with a twist, like using graham crackers and peanut butter to make a sculpture, printing on a marshmallow, or making a Mona Lisa sugar cookie. Creativity done this way becomes a virtuous cycle. These twists allow us to form new experiences, which can in turn be combined in new ways. If you can find a different way of looking at a banana than you ever have in your entire life, then maybe you can approach your work, school, or other aspect of your life with the belief that there's a different way of looking at it. And like my experience in Goodbye Art in Tattoo a Banana, sometimes we let go of the end outcome to stay fully engaged in the creative process and keep ourselves wondering what else is possible. Remembering to destroy the old that no longer works for me, all fears, all external expectations, to make room for the new, has become a critical tool to my growth both as an artist and as an individual. Destruction is the change agent of creation. We can't create without destroying, and we can't destroy without creating. And we've all faced destruction. Sometimes it's pleasant, like spring cleaning. How good it feels to declutter and get rid of things you no longer need. More often, though, destruction can be difficult and unfortunate, like breaking something we really value or losing files on a computer when it suddenly crashes. We feel like nothing can replace what we've lost. But practicing destruction has shown me that result is simply a byproduct of the creativity. It's not the creativity itself. And sometimes we need to destroy something valuable to us in order to realize that the true value is within us, our indestructible ability to create. Thank you.